Last year, I had the most amazing year, personally and professionally, all the things. Amazing. And when I sat back and reflected on how did this happen? When I realized that the reason I was achieving, I'm putting this in air quotes, success or recognition, it was because I was following my heart. I was listening to my gut. I was pursuing my passions and my interests. And the more that I did that and I was just doing me and being me, the more I was recognized and rewarded. I wasn't doing it for the rewards. Right. I was just happy. And every time I would get that recognition, I was completely caught off guard because I was just keeping my head down. I was just doing my thing. It was just kind of a check for me to no, stay on course, trust yourself, listen to yourself.
Today on the podcast, I'm very grateful and very excited to have my next guest, Lauren. And Lauren and I were connected through Anne, who was on the podcast as well. And similar to a lot of the conversations I've had with other women, very open, very vulnerable, and willing to have this conversation. I think also excited to be having this conversation. And interesting story is that November, I think it was November of 2020, you had emailed me about therapy. And I didn't realize that until we were on our call and you were like, maybe I'll share this, maybe I won't. But you're like, I'm just going to share this. And you had shared with me that you had emailed me to inquire about therapy. But at that time, I knew I was pregnant with my son. And I was like, I can't take any, because I really believe in consistency and building the therapeutic relationship. And I was like, I can't take anyone on and then leave them for maternity leave. But I thought that was really cool to know and to go back. And I found your email, and that's how I know when. But on the phone call, we said we are kind of meant to connect for this and in this way.
And I love what you said, which was that we weren't meant to work together in that capacity, and there was a reason why that didn't work out, so that we could work together in this capacity. Yes. And when you said that, it just...
I know, it's like the universe all aligns, and exactly. I love that you shared with me that piece about reaching out, and yeah, it's so true, because here we are about to have this conversation together, so I'm so grateful and appreciative for you to be here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So before we dive in to hear about some of the things that we've been talking about in terms of egg freezing, I want to hear more about you. I want you to share with the audience who you are. Every woman that has been on this podcast is actually incredible, accomplished, and amazing. So I want you to share who you are with everybody and how amazing you are.
All right. I will try to make this as concise as possible. My story is not linear, that is for sure.
I want to hear all of it, because that's what we were just talking about before we started rolling here, is both of our paths are not. And we're very close in age, very close in age, almost same age. I'll be 42 in April.
I'll be 43 in October.
Okay. So very close in age. And yeah, we just kind of discovered that before starting that both non-linear, which I celebrate and love and think is so great. So share your non-linear path with us.
I was a professional ballet dancer turned yoga instructor and massage therapist. And for the last almost 17 years, I've had my own business working with people both pre and post-rehabilitatively using yoga and massage therapy to help them deal with chronic pain, injuries, and everything from depression to managing their symptoms of cancer and just whatever you can think of. I've worked with all kinds of different people. Around 2016, I just hit a ceiling in terms of who I could see, what I could do, what I could treat. And so I ended up going back to school. I didn't plan on doing what I ended up doing, but when I looked back, I was like, oh, that happened. I ended up doing pre-med prereqs.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I did not set out to do that.
That's intense, right?
So I thought I was going to go in a couple different directions, but long story short, landed on nursing. And I ended up going to NYU for nursing school, and now I'm working in the surgical ICU. So that's just kind of that portion of my journey. And around the same time that I went into my egg freezing process, which I know we'll get into,
yes, yeah.
I also was working with clients that were going through the same thing. And so, I'll talk about how I came up with fertility yoga and then how I started incorporating this with my clients. But then when 2020 happened and the world shut down, initially I was just going to people's homes. I was running all around New York City. I did have my own private space also in Union Square where I was seeing clients.
Wow, you were doing a lot.
Yeah. Still dancing.
Still dancing.
Yes.
Yeah, we're multitaskers, right? We're multitaskers. We do lots of things at once.
And when the pandemic hit and the world shut down, I always hate saying this because I feel bad because I know that a lot of people suffered because of the pandemic and what happened with people's health. But personally and professionally, it ended up being the best thing for me.
Really?
Oh my gosh, on so many levels.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, I want to hear about that. And similarly, unfortunately for my career as well, obviously an uptick in people seeking support and mental health support.
And so I realized through that process, because everything was transitioning online, even more so than it had already been. And so initially, like I said, I was just working locally with people. And then I realized I can really begin to expand my business. I can take this outside the confines of New York City, outside of just people's homes, and start to expand on a different base.
Amazing.
A different base.
What a journey. Yeah. And I know I as someone else who has a nonlinear, there's so many dynamics and layers and probably more things you did during that time too. But it's just so incredible. For me, my journey, and it sounds like for you, is really about finding really what fulfilled you. And it wasn't settling for a career or way of being or a schedule, because you had to.
So that's really interesting that you touch upon that. Last year, I had the most amazing year, personally and professionally, all the things.
Amazing.
And when I sat back and reflected on how did this happen? How did all these things, because I was being recognized for a lot of the work that I was doing.
Amazing.
It had been a buildup. But when I realized that the reason I was achieving, I'm putting this in air quotes, success or recognition, it was because I was following my heart. I was listening to my gut. I was pursuing my passions and my interests. And the more that I did that, and I was just doing me and being me, the more I was recognized and rewarded. Now, I know that you're not supposed to do things just so that you will be recognized and rewarded. But I think the beautiful thing about that was that I wasn't doing it for the rewards.
Right.
I was just happy. And every time I would get that recognition, I was completely caught off guard because I was just keeping my head down. I was just doing my thing. And it was just kind of a check for me to no, stay on course, trust yourself, listen to yourself. You've got this.
I love that.
For as much as your path has been this nonlinear path, and I definitely have had people, kind of chastised me for that, but what I've really learned, especially throughout this last year and a half, is no, listen to yourself. The tagline on my website is all the answers that you are seeking are within, and I truly believe that.
It gets so hard to follow that, and that's why I think it's so brave and courageous to do that. And when you say chastise, that really resonates with me, because I remember when I was leaving finance after two and a half years in cubicle hell, for me, maybe that's for other people, it was not for me. I remember a lot of people judging that quite harshly. Looking back, I know it was their own projections, that they didn't have sort of the courage to do that, because you get the shoulds. This is what you should be doing. And if you veer off that path, you're looked at in a certain way. And sometimes it can be projected as judgment. But I think what it really is envy.
And I think what's interesting, I think that there's, people project their own feelings of lack, financial insecurity, and all of those things on people who do go and follow their own path and their own heart. But I also think that the more people that you're able to help, the more you're able to touch and reach, the more abundance that you experience, both personal fulfillment, but both financial.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think what you said too about, it's not done for the rewards of success, but I look at that as, and I love the success in air quotes, because that's something I encourage my clients, that you can define that in many ways. In some ways we define that as not really aligned with our values, and we have to check that alignment. But I think for me, those moments are just the validation points that you're still on the right track. This is just.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, very exciting. Well,
and
go ahead.
And then the newest piece of news that just happened. I just found out 2 weeks ago that I was accepted into the doctoral program for family nurse practitioner at Columbia. So
Oh my God. I know you shared that with me on the phone, and that's amazing. And your top choice, that was your top choice, right?
So that's going to be the next chapter of my journey, and I'm so excited.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's sort of there's this pull to help. And I think that's why you're here too, right?
Yeah.
Is that and one thing you shared, which I thought was so great, is the last step in healing is helping, which I loved. I loved that.
Yeah.
So let's dive into the egg freezing portion of this and to hear your journey. And we both froze at the same age at 37. And I know I shared with you my experience at 37 was really not having a lot of information, only knowing one other woman that had done that. So I felt really alone and isolated. And I guess sort of this passion grew out of cultivating more conversation. I'm curious if that was your same experience, that there wasn't much out there. There wasn't much conversation around this out there at the time that you did.
Very similar. So when I started the process, this is kind of the backstory of how fertility yoga was born. When I saw my doctor and I was going to be going through the egg stimulation process, she told me not to exercise because of something called tubular torsion. And this is when your ovary or fallopian tube will twist on itself. And when that happens, blood is no longer able to access the ovary and the ovary dies. It's emergent surgery. It's a big deal. So for that reason, you're not supposed to do any very deep forward folds, any very deep twists. You want to stay away from high impact exercise. So while on the one hand, I understood this from a logical standpoint that, I had to be careful with what I was doing with my body, but I also knew that my yoga practice that I was doing during the time was going to help me.
Yeah.
And the style of practice that I was doing at the time was very athletic. Again, I was also still dancing. And so I knew that I just had to modify.
Yeah.
So when I went online and I typed in yoga and fertility, I was shocked. There was virtually nothing,
Really?
which I couldn't believe because both industries are huge.
They
in their
intersect
own right.
for that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there can be so much crossover for one helping the other.
Sure.
In
Let me
both
just ask you
directions.
quick. I'm sorry to interrupt, but how did it feel if you remember in that moment, your doctor telling you couldn't do this one thing that helped you cope or helped you manage the stress in this upcoming, overwhelming, stressful process?
It was a little jarring. Because I'm such a physical person, I'm such a kinetic person. That's how I experience the world, is through my body. And so while on the one hand that was a little alarming for me, I also knew that these practices that I had cultivated throughout the years they exceeded beyond the physical. And that I was really going to be pulling those virtues as I slowed down, as I softened, and that it really just had to be a shift in mindset. Yeah.
Tell us more about fertility yoga.
Sure. So fertility yoga was born from my own experience. When I went online and I typed in yoga and fertility, there was virtually nothing out there. I could not believe
That
it
is
because
wild.
both sectors, they're just huge industries in their own right. And the fact that there wasn't any crossover was mind-boggling to me. So I took my nearly 20 years of experience as a yogi, as a student of yoga, as a yoga teacher. And at the same time, this is also when I was in school taking anatomy and physiology, biology. And so, I was really understanding from a physiological standpoint what was happening inside, internally, physiologically. And I also had a knowledge of how different postures create different effects in your body. And so I took my knowledge of both, the ancient wisdom of the East coupled with the medical science of the West, and I infused it into this practice.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Right? You see this gap, you see this void and necessary gap to fill, and you filled it.
And so there's a couple of different phases of fertility yoga, but speaking specifically about when women are going through the egg freezing process, I really recommend doing a restorative practice, restorative yoga practice. And what is that? For those who
I was just about to ask. Can you explain
for those who are not practicing or who really just practice a more athletic style? Restorative yoga is taking very simple postures, supporting them with props, and holding them for a longer period of time, anywhere between 3 to 10 minutes.
Wow. Wow. Okay.
And this elicits a parasympathetic response from your nervous system. So that feed and breathe, rest and digest portion of the nervous system, we are decreasing stress. And the postures in and of themselves, we're focusing on hip opening, because while there is this physical manifestation that we're dealing with, we're also dealing with the energetics.
Sure.
And so we are sending blood, oxygen, nutrients to the reproductive organs, and we're positioning our body in such a way to make that optimal. So that is physically what we're doing. And then we are also using our breath. And when you combine this specialized breath work with the postures, it helps to slow down the brain waves. So all of those jittery thoughts, all of those racing.
So many of those going through this, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And we are helping to tame that. We are helping to get a hold of that, because, when we're talking about fertility, we are talking about our absolute most primal instincts, which are to reproduce. And here you are being a woman who, I don't want to take away from those people's experience who, they go through fertility treatments and then they get pregnant right away, but that's not everybody's story.
That is not everybody's story.
And I would say that the former, it's fewer and farther between than I think that people who do go through fertility treatments, they oftentimes have to go through multiple cycles if they're going to be successful. And I also hate using that word too. We can talk about that, but I'm going to put that in air quotes.
That's such a complex word. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I think that can add a lot of pressure, stigma, expectation, judgment, all of those things.
And that's a really great point to bring up, because, as I've been doing this work, I'll have people, as I've been explaining what we're doing and why we're doing it, many people will come to me and say, all right, well, what are your rates of success of getting people pregnant? And I want to be very clear that fertility yoga is not going to get you pregnant.
Well, it doesn't sound like the intention is to be one of those supports, right?
Exactly.
In the same way, I feel very strongly that therapy should be a support during this process, but it's not intended to.
My intention for fertility yoga is to help you stay grounded, to help you know that you are whole, that you can go through this process. And no matter which way you land, because the fact of the matter is that once you go through fertility treatments, you are going to be transformed. Your life is going to change one way or the other.
Yeah.
And you can go through this process, not lose yourself, not feel as though you are disconnected from yourself, and you can remain whole. That is my ultimate intention for this practice.
I wish I knew this while it was being born at the same time I was going through this, but it just, a lot of those things that you just said were not my experience.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have that grounding place. I had one friend that helped ground me, and I shared on a solo episode sort of a lot of meltdown moments, but I didn't really have anything like this, and that would be amazing. So I'm so glad we're talking about it and you're sharing it, and we're going to share your website at the end of this so women can really benefit, can find you.
And the community aspect is so important. I will never forget. So, we had talked a little bit about my own experience going through it, and I really didn't tell many people at all. I just didn't. And I did feel very alone, and I felt very isolated, but I will never forget the first morning I went in for morning monitoring. That waiting room was packed. I couldn't believe it.
Wow.
And there was the first moment where I was like, okay, I am not the only one going through this.
But not through communication, just from seeing.
I just walked in and the room was full, and I was like, okay, there's something here.
Yeah.
And so a large component of the work that I do is group work, because, it takes a village. And I think that there is power in being seen. You need people there who understand what you're going through. I think even the most well-meaning people who love you, who only want the best for you, the fact of the matter is that they just don't understand and can sometimes say very insensitive things.
I have an identical twin sister, and we're super close, and have each other's back, support each other fully. And she became a mom at 30, got married at 31, became a mom at 32, and I, 34, I met Rob, and not a mom till 40. So in that way, our journeys were very different. And while she loves and supports me and wants all the good, the best for me, there were gaps where she just couldn't relate. And I had another experience that I shared on here, being around friends that might complain about children or how hard it is, and I would sit there like, I want to complain about that, or don't complain about that because I don't have that. And again, like not intentional, but also hurtful.
A lot of the work as being human is being able to manage your energy and learning how to manage your energy, learning how to self-regulate. And I think that having containers where you can just kind of let it all out is important.
Yeah.
And having practical tools and resources such as the yoga, such as the acupuncture, such as, your talk therapy, having all of these resources are practical tools that are real and that are there to ground you and that can help take you. I kind of started talking a little bit earlier about the primal nature of this process. And when you're going through this process and you're dealing with the prospect of not being able to reproduce, how challenging that can be.
Yeah.
And how that then really goes into this, your fight or flight response. What I'm trying to get at is that you can take these practical tools to help you down regulate, to help you get out of that fight or flight response.
Yes.
And, turn off the amygdala that's there to support you, but that, your prefrontal cortex has been taken offline.
Totally offline. Yeah.
So being able to have practices that put you back in your body, that connect back with you, then after that, you can start to prime your mind. You can turn on that prefrontal cortex again and have just kind of a better... You have a little bit of distance, which I think also just in terms of teachings and techniques is what we learn from meditation, So we are in the experience, but we also are able to have this bird's eye view. So we're watching and we're not reacting.
Right, which can be so hard because sometimes we just feel like everything's right in front of our face and we can't see outside of that.
Exactly. So I'm kind of bouncing all around a little bit.
No, this is all great. It's so helpful.
These are all different things that we can do to help keep us grounded, to help keep us feeling connected to ourselves during a time that will blast you open.
Yeah. I'm even as you're talking, I'm almost thinking how beneficial it would be, even if you're in the contemplation stage of egg freezing, because I even think that's a very emotional time.
For sure.
And a place that's blasts you wide open. Not even just going through it, is thinking about doing it. And I know from my own personal journey that being in there, a lot of anger about being in that place, not even having fully made the decision, but even having to think that I have to think about making this decision blasted me open. So to think, I think this could even be helpful for women that are just even considering it, like start to get grounded in these practices or understand the resources that can help you kind of create that distance and ground and regulate. Well, now that we're talking to you, they'll know where to find it. Can you share with us sort of emotionally what your experience was, what you went through emotionally as you went through your egg freezing journey?
Sure. So the very first time that I went through it was about 5 years ago. I went through the egg freezing cycle, and on retrieval or after retrieval, they got nothing. I don't have the words to express how torn apart I was when that happened. And so I ended up doing another one and was more successful then. And then fast forward to more recently, I just tried to freeze my eggs again in November. And it was really interesting, now having, doing the work that I'm doing and having all this knowledge and experience, it was really interesting to watch myself and my own experience. And even though I was able to have a little bit more distance, it was still hard.
Yeah.
It was still stressful. I still felt that anxiety throughout the process. So I would say that, just because you're armed with this knowledge doesn't mean that the anxiety goes away.
Yeah.
But I just had more resources to help myself. November, tried to freeze my eggs, and I didn't get anything again. So the fertility clinic closed in December, and then we tried again in January, and same thing. I didn't get anything. So where am I with that? I would say in progress.
Okay.
Trying to just figure out kind of what my next stages are, what my next steps are. My doctor came back to me because we were talking like, what are we going to do? And she was like, I don't think that you should continue to go forward because, the benefits that you are using for this, she's like, you're just going to run through them.
Okay.
So then one of the options that she said to me was egg donor. And I just know for myself that that's not something that I want. So I know what is important to me and what I want. And so, but I also know what I don't want. And so I'm just trying to stay with and stay clear or stay connected to what it is that I do want. And be open to the way that this is going to unfold.
Yeah.
You know, I think so much of my misery the very first time that I went through this occurred was because I was just clinging and holding so tightly. One of the lessons that is just my life lesson to learn is that I have to let go and I have to trust in divine order. And I've now had enough experiences and some life behind me to know that when I let go, I know this sounds so cheesy.
I'm right with you, because this is,
the universe is working out for you. The universe is conspiring in your favor. And when the times that I have let go, it just, everything opens up. And things that I hadn't even thought of ended up being better and ended up happening for me in ways that I never could have imagined or been open to because I was clinging so tightly.
Oh, misery is such a good word. It's such a strong word. It's such an impactful word.
Yeah.
Because I felt that too. And I love you sharing this idea of letting go, because I have had the same experience. When I get out of my own way, or I come to a place of like fully accepting the now, is when the universe like reveals things to me. And it was really interesting. That's where I was right before I met Rob. I had years of dating and sort of not recognizing my own patterns and being miserable, or narratives of like, why can't I meet anybody? And then literally I got to this place of like, I'm good, I'm happy, et cetera, et cetera. And then the universe screwed with me a little bit, because they plopped him in front of me and they plopped my own pattern in front of me. And they were like, ooh, it's both in front of you. Choose. And I got out of my own way and chose well. But that's such a powerful piece of advice for people, and that can be really hard, is to sort of let go.
That feeling of surrender. And I can look back in my life, there are 2, maybe even 3 instances in particular where it was just this feeling that went through me. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear here, but like,
you can swear.
But I was like, I fucking give up. I fucking give up. I'm done. And literally when and how that washed over me, I mean, I just viscerally, I can feel it right now.
Yeah.
And it was when that happened, literally everything opened up. So
it can be so counterintuitive. And I see this, of course, in a lot of my work with my clients, and even in my own journey in life. Like, we so desperately sometimes want to control everything and like latch on and hang on. Like you said.
I am type A. I am a high achieving type A.
Well, you're very high achieving.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
like yes, I want to control it all. I want the outcomes to be the way that I want them, when I want them. No.
No, it doesn't. No. It doesn't work like that. And that's really one of the messages I want to convey through this podcast. And this is where we started, and both our journeys being really nonlinear. Like, it's really probably not going to go the way we planned, or the way that we, thought it would. And I think that's like, internally, that's hard to reconcile. And then, compound that with external messages of where you're supposed to be at 30 something.
Totally.
And I feel like this is a really beautiful decade, but it comes with so many complexities, because there's all these ideas about what you're supposed to be doing, at what time you're supposed to be doing it, and what it means if you're not there. And then also looking around and comparing and saying, okay, other people are hitting these things and I'm not. Again, that's success. Like, how are you defining that?
Right.
And letting go of that framework. And we're also both people. And I think there's a lot of women out there that, like, we're not following the traditional path. That's not what lights us up. That's not, we are driven by, like, sort of this inner ambition and connection to ourselves and what we really, really want and need.
Exactly. And I think it's this dance. It's this dance that we do of listening, letting go, being in it, and then taking a step back and letting go and surrendering. And it's a work in progress.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's like constant work to kind of stay there. Because I think for me personally, like, I can be there and things feel great, and then I'm somewhere else. And it's like, wait, come back. So it's that dance. It's that ebb and flow.
Yeah.
Oh, incredible. Well, tell us where we can find you, first, any sort of parting words for the audience, any advice. You've had an incredible journey. You have all this wisdom and knowledge, and you're on your next adventure with school. So what would you like to leave the audience with and share? You know what's best for you. Trust yourself, listen to yourself. The answers are within you, and there are people outside to facilitate certain experiences, to support you on your different journeys, but ultimately
you know what's best for you and to trust yourself. You got this.
Yeah. I think I just want to add to that too. I think finding the right support systems, because I think the internal voice is so important and letting that drive you, but finding the right support that's sort of validating that inner voice and supporting and creating space for you. So you don't have to do it alone. You don't have
For
to,
sure.
You don't have to do it alone.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, it's so amazing to have you. So share with everybody where they can find you, where they can learn more about fertility yoga. I know you mentioned you've been on a couple podcasts. Where can they find that? Share all the good stuff.
Come to my website, Lauren Blandin Yoga, and I have all kinds of different ways to work with me. I have both group and private mentorship. I also have a library of pre-recorded videos for different stages of your fertility journey. I have a YouTube channel where I also have some of my own recordings and some of my interviews. And I was also just on the Fertility Forward podcast. And that one just went really well, and it was a really nice conversation.
Awesome.
So check out that one there. And I just want to say thank you.
Thank you. Oh my gosh. So appreciate having you here and you sharing with everybody. This is such valuable and helpful information. So thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us for Lauren's story, and join us next time to hear another incredible journey of another incredible woman.